Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we're back in Western Pennsylvania with another IUP runner, longtime athlete, longtime coach, involved in the sport for many decades. Welcome today on the podcast, Jim Lear. Welcome, Jet.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be on.
Let's talk about your origin story as a competitor or an athlete. When was the first time you got involved in competitive sports or running?
Competitive sports, I was a basketball player first and not a real good one. I ended up getting into running because I wasn't going anywhere as far as basketball was concerned. I played basketball 5th or 6th grade. I started running in the fall of 10th grade at Central Catholic in Pittsburgh.
How did you get to the track team? I understand basketball, you realized you weren't going to be NBA.
Mainly because every time we would run in basketball, and I also played football one fall, I could always beat everybody when we did our running, but I wasn't the best football or basketball player.
How competitive were you? You had to give up some sports because you weren't at the top of the game. How competitive a person were you?
I'm pretty competitive. I wasn't a great runner, but I think I did okay based on the talent level that I had. Yeah, I'm pretty competitive.
What was your high school career like? What was the coaching like, the facilities, and your experience?
It was a great experience in high school. Ran for Central Catholic in Pittsburgh. We were less than a mile from Shenley Park. We did a lot of running on the trails at Shenley Park. Track-wise, there was a track in Shenley Park that we used. And in the wintertime, we would go out to the South Park. There was an old dirt track in South Park indoors that we ran on during the indoor seasons in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So it was good. The coaching was very good. I was very fortunate in my entire running career to have great coaches, high school, and then go to IUP and get Ed and Doc and have Lou Sutton. I've been around great people, and that helped me immensely.
You think you still have dust in your lungs from that barn?
Probably, yeah. It spit brown for a couple days afterward, and it was cold in there one side and hot on the other where the heater was.
What year was that? The span of your high school career, 10 to 12?
I started in the fall of 67. I was a 10th grader. I graduated in 1970.
The running community, Shenley Park was big. There was lots of runners from different places you'd see in the park. What was your view of the sport of running beyond that? Were you aware of USA track, the Olympics? Were you a fan?
Yeah, Shenley Park was great. Growing up, we'd go there. Point Park would be there. CMU would be in there. Pitt. I remember 10th or 11th grade watching a race in Shenley Park with WVU and Pitt, Jerry Ritchie and Carl Hatfield. They came on the golf course way in front of everybody else. It was just tremendous. And I had no idea any of that stuff existed. Of course, I knew about the Olympics and Jim Ryan, but I didn't realize that close to home there were that many people that ran. And Central was always a big thing. Central always had pretty good teams, but I didn't realize the scope of the sport when I started. I simply started because that was what I could do.
What's your best accomplishments that you remember from high school?
I wasn't really that good of a runner. I wasn't on the varsity till my senior year. We had a real good group in front of us. Jim Nagel, you might be familiar with him. He was one of 5 or 6 kids in the class ahead of me at Central. Those guys were really good. I couldn't make the varsity. And the next year when they left, I ended up being the number 1 or 2 guy, one at the end because our other kid got hurt. But I ran times similar to what Jimmy Nagel and those kids had run. I wasn't too far behind them. That, to me, was a big accomplishment because I dropped my time about a minute and a half from my best junior time to my best senior time.
That was 2.5 miles then, 3 miles?
Yeah, they said 2.5, probably a little bit short. But that Shenley Park course was tough, too, with the hills on it and the trails. It certainly wasn't a manicured course. The golf course was nice. When you reach the golf course, you could make it then.
What was your team experience? What was your relationship with the other runners?
It was good when I was a sophomore and junior. We had really good teams, and I was buried on the JV team, but the kids were nice. They were all good kids. The older guys, it wasn't like they big timed you. Senior year, we were a completely new team because that group with Jimmy Nagel and the other varsity guys had graduated. So it was a brand new team. It was a good experience. I had a young coach too, Terry McCoy, who had just graduated from Fordham. He was a central runner back in the mid 60s. He came back and coached us, and I liked him. He was really good for me anyway. He ran with us every day, which was a big thing for me because when I ended up coaching at Central Catholic for 9 years, I did the same thing. And I think that helped so much to have him running beside you. That had a lot to do with me getting better.
What kind of a student were you in high school, and what was your outlook and your process of getting to university?
I was a good student from the start. I grew up out in Penn Hills and knew I was going to Central Catholic from the time I was in third grade. My dad had gone to Christian Brothers High School in Chicago, and we moved to Pittsburgh. We knew we were going to Central. We knew we were going to college. That was just a given. Just always had that idea that I was going to move on, and you were supposed to do well in school. And I always did pretty well.
How'd you connect to IUP? And did you know anybody else when you got there?
Not really. Jim Nagel had gone there a year ahead of me, except for him. No, I didn't know anybody. And it came down to schools for me. Penn State was one. I knew I wasn't going to be able to really run there. CMU was the second one, and they weren't very good at that time, and it was a little more expensive. I'm the oldest of 10, so IUP just fit the bill both ways. I knew I could run up there and affordability because we pretty much paid our way through school, which you could do then. I want to make a point of that. It was much easier to make it in 1970 by yourself than it is today. It's almost impossible today.
With a one of 10 and being a competitive athlete, how was the competition in your family? Did you guys
Um,
play games?
Oh, we were very competitive. Oh yeah, yeah. Basketball hoop in the backyard where we were fighting all the time, and whatever we played, we fought. And yeah, and growing up in Penn Hills at that time, Penn Hills was graduating probably 1,100 kids a year, and I went to Central. There were another probably 100 plus kids going to Central at that time, and then Sacred Heart with the girls. Penn Hills probably could have been graduating 1,500 if everybody would have gone. So when we grew up, you walk out of your house in the morning and there were games all day long and fighting all day long. That sort of helped being competitive.
One more thing about high school. Central Catholic all boys school then. Was there girls track ever that you saw while you were in high school?
No, Sacred Heart did not have it till after I left.
Okay, so you landed IUP. What was your experience there adjusting to college and that level of competition and coaching?
It was a pretty big adjustment for me because, like I said, I made a big jump junior year to senior year in high school, and I wasn't quite ready for that level. I had bronchitis in the summer before I went to IUP, so I didn't run my first fall, which was why I was able to run a fifth year later. And freshman year in track was a big adjustment. It took a while for me to realize that it was a different world. And there were some pretty good guys there in the class ahead of me. I beat Don Schlesinger, Jake Sorg, Bill Hampton, Doug Canan. They were very good.
What was the team camaraderie like there? Similar to high school?
Yeah, I thought pretty good. There were little factions in a sense, different groups that hung around with each other. I was able to get along with every group. I wasn't really didn't belong to any group, but the guys were good. I never had any problems at all and felt like most people were on the same page. They wanted to be good. And having Ed Fry, just running with Ed every day was just amazing.
What were the facilities of the track when you got there at the beginning of the 70s?
It was cinder when I got there. And then we had a year or two where it was just macadam till they put the surface on top of it. But I think it was cinder most of the time I was there, maybe macadam from my senior year.
Don Slusser excelled in the marathon in university. Did he get his All-American status? Were you his teammate then?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He was a good cross country runner. Besides, obviously, he was always going to those longer events from the very start.
And back then, nationals, the idea of going to nationals was before they had qualifying meets and regionals. What was your experience with nationals?
I didn't have any track wise. In cross country, we made it. I think when I was a junior, I went as an alternate, and then we made it again when I was a fifth year senior. And they had made it, I think, my freshman year that I didn't run that fall.
And the climate, I'm in Toronto right now, and it's bitter cold, but not much snow. Fall back then seemed to be more like the middle of winter in Western Pennsylvania now, I think. But the season starts August, September, run through late November. Were you running in the snow back then?
Not too often. I remember a year or two at Central Catholic when we had the WPIAL when I was coaching, where one year they actually had to move it back. I think it snowed the day it was supposed to be in the meet, and then it obviously melted quick. They pushed the meet back a day. But most of the time, no, it wasn't too bad.
What did you study at IUP?
Biology.
Of course, university, IUP, much more affordable than universities almost anywhere today. Did you have, apart from your bronchitis before you actually arrived there, any other injuries from the macadam track or anything?
No, not really. And I think back to that when we ran with Ed every day in the wintertime. We ran on the road day after day, did intervals on the road. He always did his intervals on the way out there to Homer City after crossing the road. He did everything there, miles, 400s. It was all road work, and no, never had any problem. And probably wore the same pair of shoes for the entire year.
Do you remember the type of shoes and equipment, any of that was from those early 70s?
Nike Cortez. And I still see kids wear them now just for shoes to wear around, but we ran in those.
When you think back, what was your personal best accomplishment through that program? And I
Probably cross country, my fifth year, had a pretty solid year. We had a team that was guys, again, same thing. The older kids had graduated, and Tom McGuire was our best runner. And then I was there with Tim Lulich, Dan Friedrich, Donnie Friedline, Kim Burke. We had a decent team. We won our NAIA because Edinburgh didn't run. They went to Division II that year, and we went to the national meet. I had a very solid season. I was student teaching. It was a really good semester.
Well, let's talk about the competition. The runners from Edinburgh and other schools. Who do you remember were top competition?
Edinburgh by far. Kevin Foley, I remember. Dave Antonoli was a year ahead of me. Edinburgh was always loaded. Watts was a great guy. I got to know him more later when I would take my high school kids up to his camp in the summertime. He was a wonderful guy. I thought he was vastly undervalued. I don't know if that's the right word as a coach. I don't think people realize how good he was. He was just amazing and a great guy.
Yeah, I've talked with Doug reflecting on his career. He certainly likes to tell stories and think about things. And yeah, could have been a Division I coach for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
What about the relationships with, for example, Edinburgh? Antagonistic, friendly? Do you remember being with the other runners from the other schools?
It wasn't very antagonistic. We actually beat Edinburgh, I think, when I was a junior. Doug Canan, Jake Sorg, Bill Hampton. We beat them up there, I believe, to win the conference. Antagnoli was on their team, but they weren't super deep after him. They really got much, much better, even though Doug Watts said Dave Antonoli might have been the best kid he ever had. The group that came after with Kevin Foley, that they were loaded and deep, and they just went nuts after when those kids came.
As an individual, I think Doug Watts, of course, says you can't tell the story of Edinburgh cross country and track without talking about Antagnoli, a national champion, but he opened the door to the deep recruiting that followed. As a biology student and in teaching, you knew you were going to become a teacher. At that point, did you figure that coaching was in your future?
Yeah, and actually, I wasn't definitely going to become a teacher. I was a bio major. I had that eligibility for my freshman year. And back in those days, if you wanted to use that, I had cross country eligibility for a fifth year. If you wanted to use it, you couldn't graduate. So somewhere junior year, I realized I was going to have to postpone graduation somehow. And the way I did it was to change into education. I wasn't in education to start. Once I got into education, then I realized that coaching was something definitely to think about. But originally, I just moved into education just so I could have that ninth semester. And then ended up coaching and went to Penn Hills for one semester right after. When I finished my ninth semester and graduated, I got a job at Penn Hills starting in the middle of January, the next January 75. And they didn't have a track coach for the distance runners. So I said I would do it. And I had two great kids and loved it and took off from there.
After your fifth year, where you got your extra cross country season, your best running season, did you do more racing? What happened to you joining the workforce and your training and racing after that?
I raced some up and down, but not as serious as people like, say, Kim Burke, who went on and just went crazy, ran a 2:16 marathon. Dan Kunkelman, those guys, they raced a lot more than I did. Once I started teaching and coaching, yeah, I'd race here and there sporadically. All the great races in the Pittsburgh area, but maybe a 5K or a 10K. Actually, there weren't many 5Ks then. 10K here and there through the years.
What did you think was the state of the sport then? Obviously, by then you're even more informed. You're part of the running community that has just undergone the great change of the early 70s. What are your thoughts on all that timing?
I think that was the beginning of the running boom. It was pretty big, I thought. The 10K races would get a lot of people. A lot of people started running and realizing that it could be a lifestyle. I think it was really starting to take off in the early 70s. Like I come out in 74, so I guess in 74, 75. But yeah, I felt Pittsburgh area, a lot of good runners. You run in Shenley Park and see people all the time. You couldn't run on the trails without crossing paths with 5 or 6 people every run.
The reputation of who runs track and cross country from that era is wide. Some people say, oh, smart people are attracted. Sometimes people are saying people that dropped out of other sports and couldn't make it are traded. That cross country team that you were on has unfortunately lost a few runners. Uncle Will Hampton, Donnie Friedline, both have passed on, aren't with us anymore, but pretty interesting, funny, goofy characters, huh? How'd you fit in with that?
Okay, I wasn't as crazy as some of those other people we had. Bill Hampton was quite a character, excellent runner, one of the toughest kids I've ever met. Slesser was definitely a character, and Ed was a character himself. What a great guy. All those years of running with us day after day. Just, yeah, a lot of characters.
Were you still at IUP when Ed Fry won his World Masters Championship, or was that, do you
I
remember
think
that?
I had just left. I think that was 75 when he did that spring. And I had left in the fall of 74. Christmas 74 is when I left.
People like Uncle Will, Bill Hampton, at some point, a couple years later when I was there, he reappeared, showed up in the summer, was in good shape, was running with us for summer running just on his own. And I don't remember going to many races. I just remember I was up there for the summer and he came and he was running. How much did you then get back to IUP? How much were you connected to IUP and the community there after you graduated?
A decent amount, again, because I was teaching and coaching, didn't come up a ton, but was good friends with Donnie Friedline and John Hickey came from Central Catholic. He was one of my runners at Central Catholic. A couple years after him, Steve Goldcamp came up. So decently connected, more see a race here and there and get up there every once in a while, but still pretty connected.
Okay, what about your rookie year as a coach? How well prepared were you, and what did you realize you were going to need to learn?
I had a lot more to learn than I knew, but I think I was decently prepared. Again, running with Ed, I always paid attention to the kind of things he did. And I had a good group of kids at Central Catholic. John Hickey was probably our best kid, but Dario Donatelli, who ran very well for CMU, later coached CMU, was very good. Steve Crelly was every bit as good as John and Dario. They were great kids. We only had 6 guys on our varsity when I came, but those 6 guys were good and they were great kids from the start. I never had to fight with them about anything. I was only a couple years older than they were and they never gave me any trouble, or if whatever I thought we should do, that's what we did. So they were great to have as a first year coach. So I, of course, thought I had magic. It was me, and really it was those kids. And I learned a lot from them. But there was a lot I had to learn, and slowly but surely you learn your lessons as the years go on.
The Central had a long tradition of success, a long running program. What was the support like? How'd the parents treat you? What was it like? What was your learning curve humps?
Yeah, I never even thought anything about parents or anything like that. I thought you and the kids, you ran and then you went to meets. But as years went on, I realized the parents had a lot to do with it, and those were their kids. It seems like parents got much more involved in the sport in the 70s than, say, when I ran in the late 60s. My dad came to a couple meets. In fact, when he came to my Catholic League championships as a senior, I knew that I had arrived because he was one of those guys. He wasn't going to come and watch you unless you were decent. In fact, he went to the Penn Hills Central football game when I had my tri-state coaches meet as a senior, didn't come to my cross country meet. I was a little put back about that. And then he showed up at my Catholic championship. So I knew I was big time at that point. That took off work to come and watch me run. But it just didn't seem like parents were around that much when I ran. And then by the time I came back and coached, and especially in the later 70s, parents were there all the time. And now, of course, it's crazy. I watch my grandkids run, my oldest grandson runs, and parents are there all the time.
Entering in the middle of the 70s as a coach for nearly a decade. Is that how long you stayed coaching?
9 years Central, yeah.
Cross country and track?
Yeah.
What about the learning curve to become a track coach?
I always coached the distance events, so really wasn't too much because it was the same kids you had in cross country. And then as a track coach, I made sure I got people to do sprints, hurdles, jumps, because I didn't know very much about those. And again, I was always running with my distance runners to coach other events, which I never did learn very much. I know in the long jump, you're supposed to stay behind the board and go as far as you can. Yeah, I never did learn.
Wait, we want to highlight that quotable quote from Jim Lear. Oh, don't go past the board. Okay, now go ahead.
I had a girl one day at Duquesne about 5 or 6 years ago. She was practicing high jump and she jumped and she didn't hit. She had one of those straps up instead of a regular bar. She goes, I didn't even hit it. I go, isn't that the idea of the event?
What about the nature of the change of the sport of the 70s? You did mention the way the parents' involvement grew. Society was changing, a lot going on in that decade. Did you notice anything else changing with the sport in terms of facilities that the other schools would get access to, equipment, travel, range, attention from the press? What was going on there over your 9 years?
Not as much, I don't think. In those 9 years that I was there, not like it is today. Like I'll go to the WPIL cross country meet now, and there are people everywhere. And certainly there were a lot of people there back in the 70s and early 80s, but not like today. Travel wise, I took our teams at Central up to in Rochester on the Great Invitational, and there weren't many other people doing those kind. Now you look at the North Allegheny program, and they're going everywhere and doing unbelievable things. John Neff does an unbelievable job there. 150 kids out in the summertime running in North Park. That was even more later 80s, 90s type thing than when people started reaching out. Because when I would go up to McQuaid, there were no other Western VA teams for those kind of things. They just ran around here.
What was the last year of your coaching, and what was the idea of the end of your coaching career after that?
My coaching career ever? You mean ending it?
No, at 9 years.
Yeah, I just decided it was pretty hard coaching, teaching. I was actually working part-time at Athlete's Foot, and I had a chance to go to Mercyhurst Academy, which is near Chambersburg, PA, and decided to make a change. Went there for a year, and then it was really sort of serendipitous. While I was there in the summertime after that only year at Mercersburg, I went to a thing at Pitt. I can't remember. It was some athletic training thing. The AD and I had talked, and we wanted to get more medical information for our coaches. So he and I went to an athletic training seminar or week-long thing at Pitt. Ran into John Vasbury, who was their track coach at that time. It turned out that Pitt only had 2 full-time coaches. That was their staff until the spring of 1985. And right then they were making a change. They were going to add 2 part-time people. I was walking through the doorway into Pitt Stadium. He was coming out and he goes, I'm looking for a coach. Would you be interested? And I was interested because obviously coaching at the college level was something I thought would be really cool to do. And I had to come back to Pittsburgh with no other job except that. Hope I got a teaching job, which I did. But I was able to go part-time to Pitt. So it was an interesting thing. I made the change to leave Central. I liked Mercyhurst. It was nice. But then ended up with that chance to coach at Pitt. And it was just a weird thing that I had run into him. And I knew him from Shenley Park because he was always over there. Last couple of years I was at Central Catholic. He didn't know how to get in touch with me. And so we almost banged into each other going out the door. And he said, I'm looking to get in touch with you. He goes, would you be interested? And I said, sure. My wife wasn't overly happy because we'd have to come back and not have a job, but a full-time job. But that worked out.
So do you think he would have tracked you down? You would have gotten that job if you hadn't walked past him?
I don't know. Maybe not. That was interesting. Yeah. I don't know if he would have.
How was your experience starting out there at Pitt?
It was nice. There was not much there. When I first started, we had 6 kids on the team in cross country. We were not very good the first year. I had a okay recruiting at the end of that first year. I got a kid, Paul Friedrich, Danny Friedrich's brother. I got Paul from Bethel Park, which was a big pickup. I was going for Chris Rauber too, from Central, that run for me at Central. He went to Edinburgh, and those guys, there was always a rivalry there. Some on my part, got Paul Friedrich the first year, and then the class of 87 high school kids. I got a good group of kids, very solid group of kids, and we got better fairly quickly. The first 2 years were a little rocky, but the third year when that class of 87 guys came in, Keith Dowling was in that class, Scott Humphrey from Indiana, Mike from Micah was from Quakertown. Paul was still there. We were able to build up pretty quick. Craig Wushner from Carrick in the city in Pittsburgh.
What was your approach to recruiting, and what resources and time did you have to put into that?
Decent amount. I spend a lot of nights on the phone, a lot of weekends, Sundays on the phone. And I tried to recruit Pennsylvania and Western PA specifically. Still knew a lot of people, obviously, in Western PA. I did know a lot. In Pennsylvania, since Pitt was a state school, didn't go out of state very often.
Yeah, that's a factor that sometimes becomes, people don't think about. In the 60s and 70s, university was cheap. And as the costs rose, it really amplified for out-of-state people. What about scholarships? Did you have those?
A little bit, not a lot, but John Vasbury was really good. As we got better, he gave me more money. That class of 87, I got them on probably 4 or 5 kids on maybe a scholarship and a half. But a lot of those kids were glad to have the chance to come. They were kids, I think, that would have walked on at Penn State had we not gone after them and got them.
What was the tenure of your career there? What's the length of Pitt?
I was there for, I think, 9 years. We had some pretty good years in the middle, a little past the middle, fall of 1990. We had a team that made the NCAA meet, which was pretty cool. Those seniors from the class of 87, when they were seniors at Pitt. And then we also had Jason Bodner, who was a year behind them from Laurel Highlands, good runner. But we made the NCAA meet. And the next year, we didn't make the meet, but we had a pretty good team again. And by the end, the last year I was there, we had a pretty good team, but I had some issues with John Vasbury decided to leave. He had a heart attack, and he came back from the heart attack, but just felt that he couldn't do what needed to be done at that level. And when he decided to leave, they gave the job to the sprint coach, and he and I didn't see eye to eye. So when he got the job, I didn't have a job.
Wow. Oh, what about the standing? What was it like to be at a big college with football team, had people like Tony Dorsett come through the program? Where was cross country in the psyche or the awareness of the university?
Yeah, I don't think it was a big thing. One neat thing, though, as far as football was concerned, there was one time, one of my last couple of years at Pitt, we were doing a workout up at Pitt Stadium. Johnny Majors had come back to coach, and we had made sure that we were okay to do a workout. And so we were going to do mile repeats. And one of the football coaches had kids out on the track doing something. And Johnny Majors came down out of the stands and made the guy move those kids off. These guys asked for the track. We're giving them the track. And I thought that was a great thing. Johnny Majors, he came down out of the stands and made that coach move and reamed them out. And because we were just standing there not knowing what to do, we're obviously not going to tell a football coach to get off the track. But Johnny Majors did it for us. It was cool.
How'd you handle the promotion of the spring coach and the inevitable end of your coaching career there?
Yeah, not real well, and wasn't feeling good about it. We had some decent kids coming in and some younger guys and it was going to be a pretty good team, I think. So it was tough to do that. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do, thinking about going back to high school. And I ran into Tony Bruno, who was a Duquesne coach. And he said, I don't have much money, but if you want to come and coach with me, I said, yeah, sure. So I did. And for 2 years, I coached with them. And he was in grad school getting his teaching degree. Once he got his teaching degree, he decided he was going to go on, and he ended up teaching in Ambridge and being an AD for a while. Then I got the Duquesne job and rebuild all over again. Go at it one more time.
Okay, so at this point, you've been in the sport over 20 years. Who else was paralleling you? Who from your days, either in high school or career at IUP, were you seeing that were also in the sport like you for this duration?
Tim McVeigh, he was a couple of years behind me at Central Catholic, and then he came back and coached at Central. And Billy Cabot, who was one of my assistants at Central, he and him coached together. Bill was a lawyer that ended up having to put more time into his practice. And so I ran into Tim all the time through the year. Probably him the most.
All right. So you've had several schools. We'll go on to Duquesne and after. What was your approach with the kids for goal setting through the years? Did it change from the 70s? And did you set goals as a team, as individuals? How did you manage that?
Usually we set goals as a team and individuals, what we wanted to, and as far as team goals and what individually they each could do to make themselves better and obviously make the team better too. And the big part of it is in recruiting, sometimes it's a crapshoot, but those kids that want to be good, there's not a lot you have to do. That's probably the biggest thing. You can get enough kids who want to be good. Then it's just a question of guiding them, but you don't have to pull them. Sometimes you have to hold them back a little bit. And sometimes they get competitive with each other. That's probably the biggest problem, but I'd rather have that problem competing with each other because they all want to be good than that they don't care.
How'd your personal view of competition affect this, inform coaching, change over the years?
I don't know if it ever changed a great deal. I always just wanted our teams to be competitive teams. I didn't have teams that won year after year, but I think most of the time we had teams that were pretty competitive. By the time I was done at Pitt, we're in the top 3 or 4 Big East. The Big East was Villanova, Georgetown, Providence. It was very good. At Duquesne, we were always competitive in the Atlantic 10. I think we had 7 teams in the years I was there. For the men that were second, we won once. The women won 3 times and were second 2 more times. So we were always competitive.
Were you coaching women at any point of this?
Yeah, at Pitt, my last 2 years, in fact, that's the reason I had trouble with the sprint coach, because he was the women's coach also. And we didn't get along about a couple of things. The women were actually good. Got better. Want to put any more money on the women's side. That was our first area where we had some issues. Last 2 or 3 years at women, and then I got the women again. Came probably about 2009. We redid the staff. Extra position, full-time position, come into play. I told the head coach Brian Delsite, who's now at Robert Morris, that I would take the cross country and the men and women distance, because we had a guy that was full time for just women's distance, a jump coach, hurdle coach, sprint coach, and to help.
We should probably discuss the last days of your career in the sport, and yet you're coaching, full-time work. Did you have time and interest to be a fan of the sport at the wider level?
To some extent, and like going to the NCAA meet was always great. Okay. Yeah, I was definitely a fan of the sport. Probably not so much as some of the kids really get into it. And of course, they have the time to do it too. Until 2012, I think I was a full-time teacher and a part-time coach, but coach like it was full-time. I didn't become a full-time coach until 13, the winter of 2013, when I got hired at Pitt a second time.
How was that becoming a full-time coach and focusing all your energy on that? What was the program like when you got there?
I came to Pitt. I was full time. Yeah, it was okay. The distance program wasn't really great, and I was only there for 2 years because after 2 years, I got a chance to be Duquesne's full time coach. But I liked the situation at Pitt. We were able to bring some kids in. I never saw the fruition of it necessarily, but we definitely moved things along. Myself and a guy named Adam Bray worked in the distance area. He's now down at Kennesaw State in Georgia. The Pitt program is much better now than it was in 2013, that's for sure. And the ACC is just so tough. So you might see them finish 10th in the ACC and think they're not very good, but they'll finish fifth in our region of the cross country, mid Atlantic region. So they're not bad. The ACC is just crazy. So that was really tough dealing with that. But I enjoyed those 2 years at Pitt. And then I had the chance to go back at Duquesne. And my idea there was I was going to stay and retire in my 60s, and I ended up staying a little bit longer for a couple of reasons.
You want to tell us what those were?
Yeah, essentially, I got hired. It was January 2015. My idea there was I was already 63 at that time. I was going to stay to maybe 66. And Tom Slosky was one of my assistants. He was a steeplechaser for me at Duquesne. Very good, 843 steepler. So he wasn't bad. 14.0, 5K guy. But my idea was to stay 2 or 3 years and then hand the program over to Tom. And Tom's an interesting character, definitely thinks outside the box. And some people at Duquesne thought he was a little bit above and beyond what they wanted with the program. Again, he had qualified for NCAAs 4 times, 3 in track and 1 in cross country. So he had visions of wanting to make it a top level program. And
Right.
Duquesne's Duquesne, don't have much in the way of facilities. You're stuck down there in the city. It's 2 or 3 miles just to run through the streets to get to Shenley Park. And they just see Tom's vision that he saw. And that was too bad, I think. But it's tough to have a program. There's no indoor facility at all. It's tough.
Well, being a part of the sport for decades and Western Pennsylvania, you know everybody, talked with some of the people, teammates of yours, colleagues of yours, people like Sam Bear that came before you. How well do you know some of these other stars of the Western Pennsylvania running of the 70s and after?
Sam's a great guy. I've always got along well with Sam. It's hard not to get along well with Sam. He's the nicest guy and just a reservoir of running knowledge. And he's a good friend of John Wilkie, who coached at North Hills. And John Wilkie and I banged heads for years when he coached North Hills and I coach at Central Catholic. And I have nothing but respect for John Wilkie and Sam Bear and those guys. They had all those good runners out at North Park. And one of the things Sam did to help me out at Duquesne was Brianna Schwartz went to Colorado and had a tough time at Colorado, a lot of injuries. And when she graduated from Colorado, wasn't sure what she wanted to do. She had a lot of eligibility left because of injuries. She decided to come to Duquesne and go to grad school. And so she ran for us and we won a conference championship in 2021, the year that we had cross country in March. But Sam sent Brianna or helped get Brianna to come to Duquesne for 2 years. And she was great for our team. Just you'd have never known that she was the runner that she was in high school with all the 42 mile. And that's falling and crawling across the line to do that indoors at 10:10, 3,200. I think she ran by herself. But just what a great kid. And Sam helped with that. And we got a conference championship out of it.
Look, that's a lot of people that ran through the 70s. A lot of people made the transition to longer road racing. Marathon became the kind of star sport of running. I haven't talked to too many people that coached the whole way through COVID. What was the impact and the outlook when the pandemic started for you?
Yeah, COVID was interesting. We lost our outdoor season in 2020. And for our women's team, we were second in the conference in 2017 in the Atlantic 10, which for us, it's tough. You're dealing with a VCU, UMass, Rhode Island, George Mason, state schools that have a lot more resources and are a lot less expensive than us and therefore could have deeper teams. We lost in 2017 on the 4x4 to George Mason, who obviously always has 400 runners, but it came all the way down to the 4x4. Our 2020 team, I think, was going to be as good. And we lost them. We had just finished the indoor meet, and I thought we were outdoor. We were going to be much, much better because the 10,000 came. We had a fifth year Shannon Taub, who now coaches at Duquesne, excellent coach and great athlete. She was going to be doing 3 or 4 or 5 things for us that spring. Lizzie Morris, one of our distance runners, was going to be back as a fifth year. So we had some things coming back, and we were, I think, ready to have a really good team, and we had no season. And then we weren't in school for back on campus for 5 months or something. We left in March and didn't come back until September. Duquesne did start school that September, so we did have the kids, so we practiced, but that was weird too because you had no meets. So we'd have a few inter-squad type of things. And then luckily we got that cross country in March, so we had something to do while in that winter. But I'll never forget that winter of 2021. And it snowed at the beginning of February, and there was snow on the ground the entire month. And we did all our practices in Shenley Park on the roads. We never ran on grass one time and ended up winning the conference. It was interesting.
Does it seem like a long time ago or just happened? COVID now.
Both. It seems like it was forever ago, just yesterday.
What, reflecting on the whole career from your youth to your coaching in all these different places at different levels, do you think you have a legacy, or what do you think was your best and most precious impacts and achievements?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a legacy or not. Probably the biggest achievement would be taking fairly average kids into Division I and doing fairly well with them. Because I never got, for the most part, kids that were the high school studs. Keith Dowling was a 928, 3,200 meter guy out of York Catholic High School and ended up running 1349 and 2854. And he was the epitome. Tom Slosky wasn't a stud coming out of Highlands High School in Corona Heights, but ended up being a very good runner with 4 NCAAs. Yeah, probably, if anything, taking kids that were good, but not considered, wasn't fighting the world to get Keith Dowling. All I had to do was beat Penn State as a walk-on. Tom Slosky, I don't know that anybody was really greatly after him because he was with Ian Fitzgerald, the old O'Toole kid at Mount Lebanon. There were a lot of better kids than, in fact, Andy Thomaswick on his own team was a year ahead of him. So, yeah, probably taking average kids and getting them to believe in themselves. And every once in a while, you see somebody who's a diamond in the rough. You can see they're going to be better than they think they can be.
Oh, that's great. All right. It's been good spending the morning with you, Jet. Any other last comments you want to say on people you coach, people you run with will enjoy these reflections and thinking about them with you?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And I love your podcasts. I check them out all the time on the IUP Facebook page. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.